welcome to the January 2026 edition of the Community Lens. I hope that you are braving and surviving the cold, and I'm going to pass it off and have my guests introduce themselves, and I'm Kara Papa, the host.
Hi, my name's Eddie Lawton. I'm with iHeart Homes Real Estate. We have our new office that just opened recently in Northford Center next to Pop Pop's Coffee Shop. I'm here to discuss the local market and what's going on, and what's going on with the town and everything with housing and the demand and what's going on with the local market.
And I'm William DellaCamera from Chuck Rowley's Harrison Hill Farm in Northford, and I'm here tonight to talk about the heated battle over PA 490, the taxation of farmland in the state of Connecticut, and how it is going to affect us farmers.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for coming out tonight. It's freezing and joining me. North Branford, January has been a busy month and beyond. And so here's an outline of the conversation that we're going to have tonight and just a few things that I wanted to add along the way. So we've had 2 public hearings around zoning this month, including proposals that would allow multi-unit apartments in business zones without a mixed use and requests to change parcels currently zoned R40. We've also had a major snowstorm, and I want to start by thanking our town services, first responders, fire department volunteers, and most importantly, the public works crew. I hope you guys get a nice rest tonight because you've been working very hard. And these are funded by us and our taxes, and we appreciate everything you do. At the same time, we're entering a new election season. The state legislative session is about to begin, and locally, we've had serious conversations around PA 490 and the rising tax burdens that were all of a sudden thrust upon us. And that matters because the farms feed us, and they're also businesses, especially here in town. And so Mr. DellaCamera will tell us all about what's been going on there. Local is powerful, so I also wanted to share that it's a small state. We have many members that live in town of the SVFT, Local Teachers Union. There is a very important election on February 4th, 2026. I hope that you vote. There are 2 candidates, Melanie Perry and Eric Klotz. They are running for executive union rep. That is a full-time position and very, very important. So please look in, read. I have their essays here and some more information. And please give that a look as we go through the episode. It will pop up at the end of the episode or while I'm talking right now. And really lean in to that democratic process. I believe strongly that we need balance between housing development and food security. I drive through towns across this country and see farmland turned into single-family developments. And I wonder, when are we going to talk seriously about how we eat? If land is disappearing, we should also be talking about micro-farming, local food systems, and help people sustain themselves. As a member of the Agricultural Commission, I am the only person on there that is a hobby farm. I don't make my profits or money by farming, but I do raise chickens and I do have a greenhouse. So it's important to me to talk about these issues because they are connected. I was having a conversation with a friend of mine, and it occurred to me, and I said, what do John Adams, Mahatma Gandhi, and David Ben-Gurion have in common? Different times, different places, but they all stood for something, and they all understood systems. And they all understood systems because they were all barristers from London. So they worked within their system to change their systems. They weren't outsiders yelling into the void. They were trained, thoughtful, and deliberate. And they understood that progress requires organization, education, and participation. And that brings me to where we are right now. People are angry, people are scared, people are protesting. And yes, there are paid organizers That's not new. Paid organizers exist in every democracy and organization. They help people who don't have unlimited time, money, or access find their way to the table. Being organized does not make a movement illegitimate. It makes it possible. So what is illegitimate is violence. We can all agree on that. Taking a human life is wrong, regardless of anyone's job description, in my opinion. But we also have to remember why protest exists in the first place. The country was founded on the idea that the common person has a voice, that government exists for us and by us. We are not meant to sit at the feet of power and beg. We are meant to participate. That's why we have public records. That's why we have FOI laws. That's why we have public hearings. Being heard doesn't always mean getting your way or agreeing with decisions, but it always matters. And when it feels like the world is on fire, the hardest thing and the most important thing is curiosity. Not reacting to one headline, not one image, not one clip, but asking the question, the right question of the right people. So that being said, I'm going to pass it over to Mr. Lawton to see if he can answer some questions about his public hearing and the market here in North Branford and what's the reality.
Sure.
Thank you.
The market here is extremely strong. Inventory is very low. I believe from this week alone, there's only been 2 active listings for sale in North Branford and Northford combined. So there really is a housing shortage. And we did go for a text amendment to allow for expanding the density and requirements for possibly allowing first floor apartments in certain zones, particularly in business zones where some businesses are not, you don't necessarily need as many businesses in those zones. So expanding and creating more housing options in zones that are more densely populated would help with the housing supply, but also keep the town rural in size and, focus on the already developed parts of town. Now, our amendment did get rejected, which was understandable because there were certain safeguards and provisions that were not in the text amendment that we should revisit. And there's a lot of talk about the regulations changing currently within the town for zoning and some laws that are taking effect. So just coming up with a holistic approach that works for everybody is pretty much the goal that we're looking for, and hopefully bringing more people into the town at a reasonable level to expand. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for the great introduction you had there. Before I start on the Public Act 490, I just want to say that, through the troubles I've had over the past few years in advocating not only in town, in state capitol, and in the U.S. Capitol, getting and educating yourself before you stand up and say something means a lot, and you really need to have that education to hold it deep to your heart when you go fight for stuff like this. So, I just want to thank you for saying that about when you fight for something. So, I'll pull back to the recent news about the PA 490 and in the state of Connecticut and what it's about. Every state in the United States does have a similar form of PA 490, and the idea behind that, and Connecticut adopted in 1963, is to lessen the tax burden on productive farmland to the farmer, so that the farmer would, in reality, hopefully keep the land in production rather than sell it for development, which was held its merit and still does. So when this whole issue with the reevaluation came up, which it has to be reevaluated just like any piece of property, whether it's commercial or housing, on a 5-year basis. So they take and they reassess and they try to come up with a reasonable taxable price for that land, or what it should be taxed at. So what happened is the claims are that participation was very low while they were surveying for the land, and that started to skew the survey. And at that point, us farmers now are saying, well, at that point you should have done something instead of let it continue to skew itself and bring it to other people and essentially be rubber stamped across desks of Connecticut government that just kept it moving along and then became law and then is sent out to tax assessors. And then the assessors are able to use that valuation in their assessment. So some of the land like ridiculously went from $40 to like $1,400-$1,500 an acre for like wetland, swampland, and ledge land. That's uncalled for. Pastures took a relatively big jump, which that's what we have a lot of, a pretty good deal of in North Branford, and orchards, astronomical. So it was contended a little bit. It was heard, so they reassessed what they had already done. They kind of augmented the numbers a little bit and put it back out the beginning of January, and it was still bad. And that's when some other farmers decided it was time to stand up and say, enough is enough, And they brought it to the Capitol, they brought it to people and said, here it is. Well, less than a week later, our governor put a stay on that and said that it's not going to be valued at that land price anymore. So he's going to revert it back to 2020, which we're already paying, so it's not a big deal. So in the meantime, I, along with other farmers in North Branford, went to our tax assessor, and he said, no, I'm not going to use those. Because it's just when policy management puts that out, it goes to the town, and the town does not have to use those. Those are just values that they set on it. If the assessor doesn't want to adopt those values, he can use whatever he wants. I don't know exactly if he's able to say zero. I don't know if he has that power, but our tax assessor wasn't going to do that. In the meantime, some of us have rented land in other towns, so we went to those towns, and one other town close to here said, no, we're going with that assessment valuation. So that would have thrown our possible land rents up, because when we rent land, farmers we're renting it from, or family, they want to recoup enough money out of the rent to pay the taxes.
Absolutely, yeah.
But then again, I went to one of my landlords, and I knew exactly what she was going to say before I walked in the house. And when I walked in, she said, I'm selling it all. I don't want it no more. I'm not putting up with this. I don't need it. I don't want to do it. So that is some very valuable land. And if she wants to sell it, I don't blame her, because it's really valuable on the open market. Even with the lowered assessment, it's still the money she can make on it. But anyways, she calmed down. Now she knows, so she's better off about it. But so that was the whole idea behind Public Act 490, and whatever the other states call it, was to keep the tax burden off the land, to make it, incentivize it for the farmer to not sell it for development. So one thing I've been hearing a lot on social media and or in person too is, oh great, you guys got a farm tax. What about the rest of us? Farmers always get everything. And some other things that I don't think, when we're talking about agriculture, and I said it from day one and I'll say it again here, agriculture is the backbone of America, and it's the backbone of, towns, cities, states, and America. But one thing that most all of us farmers have to agree upon is that it's not a Republican and Democrat issue, it's a right and wrong issue. And we got to get it right, because if we get it wrong, there's not going to be us, and we don't need that. So we got to put a lot of those differences aside, and the majority of farmers do. So back to hearing that farmers always get this, they always get that. Well, in the tax situation, remember, all of us farmers still have private lives. We still have our private house, our private vehicles, that we still pay taxes like every other taxpayer in town does, or and the state does. We still all, so yes, we may have tax breaks on productive land, and we may have tax breaks on, let's call it our farm complex or where we do business and our machinery. But so do all these other companies too, because a lot of time when you court new business into your town, you court new business into your town because you give them tax breaks for a certain period of time. So although we do have tax breaks on our equipment and our property, well, so do other people in industry and business. I mean, we have industries in town here that pay pilot taxes. So basically they payment in lieu of taxes of what they want to pay. So, when I see on social media and I hear out in the public of people saying that a farmer's getting another tax break, it's not really that true. We do get tax breaks on our farm business, but so do other businesses. And other ways that the public doesn't know. This one just happens to be brought up because land is vast, not a small building that has closed doors and a wall that you don't see what's in that building.
Right.
You see our equipment in our fields. You see us in this vast expanse of land. Now, and there's also other reasons to fight for Public Act 490 is we're leaving open space. And although people may or may not agree with this statement, but I've seen it many times of all houses that are listed for sale around our farm that they specifically say that the farm is preserved and will never be built on. So I've had this talk with the real estate industry before, people in the real estate industry. You guys use us to sell your properties, but when in time of need, we hope you're there to protect us too. So
Right.
being said is, behind closed doors, don't champion your lobbyists or your industry to try to find and develop farmland, because you use that on the other side as a sales tool.
Right.
So
true.
Yeah.
I've had that talk with some people in the real estate industry, like, you got to be cognizant on how you go about what you say. Don't use your lobby and your industry to gobble up all the farmland, because you won't have that sales tool anymore.
Right. Right.
Now, that's one, but now go to the environmental side of it. As much as the general public thinks that, we work 100 and something hours a week to feed America, that we're out there destroying it too, but we're not. A lot of times people think farm is farm and they're destructive and they're using this image of us spraying chemicals everywhere, and we're not. But think of the land that's open for wildlife. Think of the buffers we leave between water systems, and we take care of all that. There's a big picture to keeping farms in business, bigger picture than, oh, I lost what? I mean, I'm only going to make a hypothetical guess here, but I'm guessing if this Public Act 490, if this assessment went through, how much is it really going to gain the town
Well, that's what I was going to ask.
in the end? I mean,
Yeah.
I know a lot of us, like you talked about maybe services for the snowstorm, but our land doesn't technically need, and we might have a brush fire, but it doesn't always need the assistance that a house or a home or people that need, an ambulance or fire service. And some of us have a vast road frontage along the town roads that the road mower may or may not even have to mow. I think farmers in this town give way more back than
Right.
what would have been gained from that taxes. I mean, that might be a biased statement on my part because I am a farmer, but just put it on, pencil it out on a piece of paper, and if you want to debate that, we could debate that.
Right, you have the equipment, but I was going to ask, after listening, what is your lens when it comes to, farmland? Do you feel like it's worth going out, like through your eyes as a developer and a real estate person? Do you drive around maybe sometimes and look at things and think, oh, I could put so-and-so houses there? Or do you appreciate the fact that there's still, because to me it's all about food, right? At some point we keep putting up these houses like I was talking about. I drive through Pennsylvania sometimes and I'm like, oh my God, all of these farms are gone and these single family houses. But those farms created food, right? So eventually the density and the need for housing, and we have to decide, you know, what we're going to eat. Are we going to eat ground up bugs? Because I mean, that's going to be our protein source.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, what's your lens on it for business wise?
Yeah, it always comes to mind when you're looking at properties, you know, what could you do with it and stuff like that. But also what makes the charm of the town, like you said, is having the open space and the farms. So having a balance, in my personal opinion, is beneficial, because if it is so much density, then it kind of takes away from that rural feel, and people might not be as attracted to the town because of that. So I'm very biased because I live here and I love seeing the farms and everything like that. So that's why with our amendment 2 that we're trying to accomplish is developing areas that are underutilized or already developed, so we can focus on those while preserving and keeping intact with the town. And also what you said about the taxes and the burden that the big parcels give. They also don't have children going to school and things like that.
That's
so
a big thing.
So it is a balance, like you said. So I
And we
agree
were
with
also
that.
talking about like redevelopment, like putting in maybe mixed use if we were talking about Central Plaza or something.
Right.
So
utilizing those
spaces
properties,
instead of,
yeah. So encouraging that type of growth. You know, and the town does have some provisions in there to, you know, keep the density lower. Not sure if a lot of people know about this, but to connect to sewer, for example, is even if you're doing multifamily housing or something like that, it's $12,300 per unit. So it's not just per building, it's per unit. So it's very cost prohibitive for a big complex to go in, even though unless you go with, you know, the state regulations for affordable housing or something like that and just follow the town regulations, you still are very limited on what you could build in the commercial zones, and it does get very expensive to do that.
Okay.
So
Back to you mentioned Pennsylvania. Just news today for Pennsylvania is a farm down there was offered multiple millions of dollars to put up a data center, which data centers, let's face it, are going to be the next demise of their data centers are going to go to open space like windmills and solar energy right now. As far as I'm concerned, they got to stop calling farms solar and although solar and wind it's not a farm. So take that out of it, because a farm gives you some sort of essence that it's something that's not. But the farmer actually sold his land way less to preserve his farm, just to make sure. And it was a multiple millions of dollars that they were going to give him. And another thing with Pennsylvania is, I don't know if it was an under, you know, it was kept on the low side, but at one point, one of their powers to be down there, like you said, along the highways, well, they were given more money to court those farms along the highways so that people wouldn't see it, to put the blinders on, which is kind of deceptive in a way, but
Yeah.
you know, that's just the thing. Like, you know, when you're in a different industry, you look at it a different way.
Right.
But
exactly.
you got to keep that. You know, there's a lot of farms that are just rural America is in a crisis right now, and it's dying. And if people have to wake up, that's 100%. Not just because I am a farmer, but rural America is dying and is almost dead. Yeah. I traveled 4,250 miles in a week, less than a week, from here to Texas, and it's the similar. It could be a Polaroid photo from town to town and state to state, and it's the same story, farmer to farmers. You know, we can't put up with the consolidation anymore. The consolidation leads to such antitrust, and you can't do anything anymore. Stuff is regionally zoned, priced, so you're already at a disadvantage, and minimum wages are out of control from state to state, and it's just a burden that's getting put on, and it's getting into the other industries too. I'm not, you know, everybody faces their problems, but it seems to be more accelerated in the farming side of it. So any little bit of help or understanding we can get from the public and the support we can get, we're all going to need it, no matter what.
You took some questions away from me because I've been following they've set up some groups on the PA 490. So I've seen, like you mentioned, people complaining about the taxes. The farmers get the tax breaks. We don't. And then the one I really want to mention is the low participation, because I've experienced that myself in my industry. They'll say, oh, well, we put a survey out and nobody, went on to it. And so we just made the decision anyway. And that's where the responsibility comes in. Like, if you needed that data and they weren't coming back, then you should have been making phone calls. You should have been knocking on doors. You don't just make a decision for people that aren't there.
So that low participation statement, it's a good one, but people that are following this and putting pressure on, and then they're not really believing that. I'm one that's I'm on the fence about believing it, and the only thing I could say to that is in some of the other things I do in agriculture and looking at some of the stuff we do or who it goes out to, the average age of the farmer is well into the 60s, right?
Right,
so,
that's where
so
I
now
read,
we're sending out a postcard that quite could be taken at, it looks like a piece of junk mail with a QR code on it. A 60-something-year-old farmer is not going to do that. And if he does do that, it may even be him calling his kid and saying, hey, how do I do this? So then he shows him on the cell phone, and then it's this big, long survey on a cell phone. Who's really going to sit there and do that?
Right.
And that's part of it. The other part of it is, you got a lot of different, there's a lot of different answers to that question. One of them is, and I've been hearing it, and I'm starting to think it too, is, in my business, we have partners. The state wants to be our partners, and the feds want to be our partners. Well, guess what? We don't want them as partners.
Right.
Because they ain't helping us.
They're meddling.
So now, do you want to fill out a survey? How honest do you want to be on that survey?
Right.
I mean, what are we going to do here? And for a long time, I was thinking that there is a lot of things that surveys are good for. And when it comes to our industry, especially what they call specialty crops, and what's so special about a tomato and a pepper and eggplant, but there's low participation in that. But when you get into even our banking side of it too, there's no quote unquote benchmarks. And why is there no benchmarks? Because the data analyst that was given the job to do that got so frustrated trying to figure it out, they just give up on it. Because think about going on a farm that produces something like we produce. You start it from a seed in a greenhouse in March, and you don't get anything from it until August. But that plant lives over a certain period of time. The analysis on that is completely impossible.
Yeah, no.
Hour-wise and everything. So when you have no benchmarks in the lending institution, what do they have to lend against?
Right.
So now they were asked to look at these value numbers. If the lending institution's balance sheet is already coming near the red, you're putting the fox in the hen house. You're asking the wrong person. Well, if we inflate the land values, then, well, hell.
Then they got to pay you taxes instead of paying my...
No, but the problem in that is where they were getting into the red on their balance sheet, if they make the land assess more value, then their balance sheet essentially comes out of the red real quick and gets in the black, because now that piece of land is worth more money. Mm-hmm. So
that's true.
We have all
on that
could
side,
they be called conspiracy theories right now? Yes, but you know what? Like you said in your opening statement, there's Freedom of Information Acts. You know what? Well, one has been filed for it. So now we're asking you the questions, and there's only certain individuals in it. So now start to produce the answers. You got UConn that was supposed to be in charge of sending out the questionnaire. Did it go to every farmer, or did it only go to certain farmers? I've heard it went to 140 farmers. I've heard it went to 700 farmers. I heard it went to 2,000 farmers. Which one is it? Give us the papers and let us look at it. Because if it was only 140, and you claim you only technically got back 71, well, if it's 71 on 140,
that's about 50%.
That's about 50%. But if it's 71 on 2,500, that's pretty bad.
Right.
Now start calling people. How good are their records? whose records do they use with emails, phone numbers for what farms?
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
So, you know what? Are the farmers mad right now? Yes, I'm one of them that's mad. I'm mad for the reassessment. I'm mad for a bunch of other things that we don't have time to talk about today. But you know what? If you did your job right and you kept track of what you did, you will very easily be able to fill the ask of the Freedom of Information. And if you did nothing wrong, then don't worry about giving them to us. But if you start dragging it out, guess what? Us farmers are going to get even more pissed off because we're people that know that things happen on a timely basis and things have to happen that way. We're people that put our life into our job and can watch it disappear in minutes,
Right.
if not seconds.
As you guys did.
So stop dragging us out over this long period of time.
Right.
It's not good for us and it's certainly not good for our mental health. So when you jab us like you did with the reassessments, you have to assume that you are going to get some kickback.
Right. Right. I hear that. I do have one last question for you, Eddie, which is about traffic, because in the last planning and zoning meeting, a lot of the complaints about changing to the business one was traffic was going to increase. So, like if you put apartments in or something, traffic's going to increase because you're going to have more people living there. But businesses want to go in because there's already the traffic there, right? Not necessarily increasing the traffic. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you're talking about the Foxen Road with duties?
Yeah, the
and
duties.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, you know, businesses obviously have more traffic in and out, and residential has more traffic going in and out, but it's more longer term. So, but businesses want people around to patronize the business, so I would think that it would be like a combination of both, I guess.
So the traffic would be more about pulling in and out of the business, and it would be increasing the amount of traffic.
Probably, yeah, with the, you know, pulling out if there's no stoplight or something like that. I would think that would be an issue, but they do traffic studies. If they, any type of development, they, with the site plan and everything like that, they need calculations and things.
And another point was the land values. So this is your business, so I'm just curious.
Sure.
So if there was an apartment building that went there, how would that affect the price of the houses around it versus a business going in there?
It's a good question. It depends probably on what type of business goes in there. There are businesses already in that zone, restaurant and I believe an office. So if it's, you know, like a McDonald's or like a fast food chain, I would think it would probably negatively impact the houses around it.
Okay.
But also on the flip side, if you do this big housing structure there where it's much more density and stuff like that, people might not be as attracted to it because it's kind of taking away and more hustle and bustle, I guess, even though it is a busier road over there anyways. But probably something that's very commercialized or, you know, one of the big chains probably would be a negative impact on the houses over there, but not by much because North Branford does have such a housing shortage still, so people are very just looking to get into something right now in this market anyways.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Well, does anybody have any last questions or statements or anything?
No, thanks for having me.
I learned a lot. Thank you guys for
Yeah.
coming on. I really appreciate it. I think
Thank you.
that everybody's going to get a lot out of this. And I hope that you all ask some good questions because I'm sure I'm going to process overnight and have more questions, but I'll reach out. Thank you so much. Have a great month of February, everybody, and we'll see you next month.
Hi, my name is Megan, and I'm the owner of Get Organized with Megan Rose. I specialize in helping people create organized, stress-free homes through my services, which include decluttering and organizing, donation pickups, and daily chores such as laundry, dishes, and tidying up. I understand that inviting someone into your home can feel overwhelming, and many people feel hesitant or embarrassed. But I want you to know my services are 100% judgment-free. I'm here to help, not judge. In addition to my organizing work, I'm also the administrator for our town's free page. where I donate many of my clients' unwanted items to help others in the community. Giving back has been an important part of my business since the very beginning. I've lived in North Branford for 11 years with my boys, and I truly love being part of this community. Right now, I'm running a giveaway for 1 free hour of my decluttering service. Everyone who enters from town will receive $15 off their next session. Be sure to check out my Facebook page, Get Organized with Megan Rose, to learn more about my services. I hope to hear from you soon.